For years, Buddy Valastro appeared to have complete control over his life. Millions watched him smile under pressure, command a busy bakery, and turn chaos into celebration with every cake he delivered. To the public, he was confident, successful, and unbreakable. But behind that steady voice and familiar face, Buddy Valastro was quietly carrying weight that almost crushed him. And the man audiences see today is not the same one they remember. Before the fame, the burden began. Long before Buddy Valastro became a television star, his life was shaped by responsibility rather than choice. He was born in Hoboken, New Jersey, into a working-class Italian-American family where Carlo's Bakery was not just a business, but survival. The bakery sat beneath the family's small apartment, and from a young age, Buddy's world revolved around flour, ovens, and long hours. While other children played after school, Buddy washed trays, scrubbed floors, and watched professional bakers work, learning quietly by observation rather than instruction. At 11 years old, he became a real helper. At 15, he was decorating cakes. By 17, his childhood ended abruptly. His father, Bartolo Valastro Sr., the man who ran Carlo's Bakery and carried the family's stability, was diagnosed with lung cancer and passed away only months later. The loss was sudden, devastating, and left the bakery without leadership. There was no transition plan, no safety net, and no adult waiting to step in. Buddy was still in school, still a teenager, but the business, the employees, and his family depended on him. He made a decision that would define his life. Buddy dropped out of high school and took full control of the bakery. His days stretched to 18 hours, 6 days a week. He handled payroll, suppliers, equipment, customer complaints, and staff fears, all while still trying to master the craft of baking itself. He later admitted that doubt followed him constantly. While his friends planned college and futures, Buddy was waking up before dawn, questioning whether he had made the right choice and whether sacrifice would ever lead to stability. The bakery struggled through those early years. Competition increased, margins stayed thin, and mistakes carried serious financial consequences. Buddy was learning leadership through failure, often at personal cost. But he never framed this period as injustice. To him, it was obligation. He believed that preserving his father's legacy mattered more than his own comfort, and that belief became the foundation of everything that followed. What no one saw then was how deeply the pressure was already shaping him, planting stress that would surface years later in far more dangerous ways. The rise that came with a price. Buddy Valastro's breakthrough did not arrive overnight, but when it came, it changed everything at once. After years of barely keeping Carlo's Bakery afloat, his skills began attracting attention beyond Hoboken. A turning point came when he appeared on Food Network Challenge. Buddy didn't just compete, he stood out. His confidence, speed, and calm under pressure surprised judges and viewers alike. When he won, the prize money mattered, but the exposure mattered more. For the first time, Buddy realized that television could become a lifeline for the bakery, not a distraction from it. That opportunity expanded when a network approached him with an idea that made him hesitate. Cameras inside his family bakery meant exposing every flaw, every argument, every mistake. Buddy understood the risk. Reality television could easily turn serious work into spectacle, but the bakery still needed stability, and he believed the reward outweighed the danger. When Cake Boss premiered on TLC, it exceeded every expectation. The show spread internationally, airing in more than 180 countries, and Carlo's Bakery transformed from a struggling neighborhood shop into a global destination. What viewers saw was controlled chaos, impossible cake orders, tight deadlines, loud family arguments followed by quick resolutions. Buddy appeared firm, decisive, and endlessly capable. Behind the scenes, however, the pressure multiplied. Filming schedules were relentless. Baking days started early and ended late. Tourists flooded Hoboken, overwhelming a space never designed for that volume. Buddy expanded rapidly, opening new locations, launching restaurants, and agreeing to additional shows. From the outside, it looked like momentum. Inside, it felt like survival mode. The workload began to consume his life. Holidays disappeared. Family moments were missed. Rest became optional. By his late 20s, the stress reached a breaking point. Buddy experienced his first panic attack, severe enough to send him to the emergency room. At the time, he didn't understand what was happening to his body. He only knew that the pressure he carried every day had finally found a way out. Instead of addressing it publicly, he buried it. The cameras kept rolling, and Buddy kept smiling. When control began to slip. By the time Buddy Valastro reached the peak of his fame, the image the public saw no longer matched the reality he was living. His schedule was packed beyond reason. Filming commitments overlapped with business meetings, travel, and constant problem-solving across multiple bakery locations. He was no longer just a baker or a television personality. He was the center of an operation that depended on his presence, his decisions, and his energy at all times. The pressure to perform never paused, even briefly. The panic attacks that began in his late 20s did not disappear. They became something Buddy learned to manage in silence. He rarely spoke about them, believing that acknowledging weakness could unravel the control he had worked so hard to project. During this period, he worked through weekends, holidays, and family events, convincing himself that endurance was the same as strength. When he later addressed panic attacks on one of his shows, helping another baker through a breakdown, viewers did not realize he was speaking from experience. That empathy came from pain he had already lived through. In the middle of this strain, Buddy made a mistake that shocked his audience. One night after drinking wine, he drove when he should not have. He was arrested for driving while intoxicated, an incident that instantly made headlines. The most damaging part was not the arrest itself, but how quickly public perception shifted. Supporters questioned his judgment. Critics seized the moment. For a man who had spent decades trying to hold everything together, the loss of control felt deeply personal. Buddy pled guilty and apologized publicly. He did not excuse his actions or minimize the danger. Privately, the incident forced him to confront something he had avoided for years. The pace he was living at was unsustainable. Fame had not removed pressure from his life, it had amplified it. In the months that followed, he stepped back, reduced commitments, and refocused on his family. It was not a dramatic reset, but it was the first time he acknowledged that success had come with emotional consequences he could no longer ignore. Even as he tried to regain balance, challenges continued. His mother, Mary, a central figure in both his life and the bakery, was battling ALS. The disease slowly took away her strength and changed her personality, creating emotional strain that cameras could never fully capture. When she passed away, Buddy shut down all Carlo's bakery locations for her funeral, a rare pause in an otherwise non-stop life. The loss left a void that work could not fill. The accident that almost took everything away. In September, Buddy Valastro believed he was finally in a quiet moment of his life. The world was slowing down after months of uncertainty, and he was at home in Montville, New Jersey, spending time with his family. There were no cameras, no deadlines, no public appearances. Then, in a matter of seconds, everything changed. While attempting to fix a bowling pin setter in the private bowling alley of his home, a mechanical malfunction turned routine maintenance into a nightmare. Without warning, the machine jammed and violently pulled Buddy's right hand inside. A thick metal rod pierced straight through his hand, not once, but 3 times. He was trapped, unable to pull free, bleeding heavily and in extreme pain. Panic set in quickly, not only because of the injury, but because he understood immediately what was at stake. His hands were his livelihood. Baking, decorating, shaping, teaching. Everything he had built since childhood depended on fine motor control. His teenage sons were the ones who saved him. Faced with an impossible situation, they grabbed an electric saw and cut through the metal rod that had pinned their father in place. It was a moment no parent ever expects their children to endure. By the time Buddy reached the hospital, doctors were blunt. The damage was severe. Tendons, nerves, and muscles had been torn. There was no guarantee he would ever regain full use of his hand. For a man whose identity was inseparable from his craft, the possibility was devastating. Surgery began immediately. The first operation lasted hours and focused on stabilizing the damage. A second followed soon after, recommended by specialists who warned that without further intervention, permanent loss of function was likely. But these procedures were only the beginning. Over the next several years, Buddy would undergo a total of 5 surgeries, each addressing another layer of damage left behind by the accident. Recovery was slow, painful, and uncertain. During this period, Buddy disappeared from public life. Filming paused. Bakery operations slowed. For the first time since he was a teenager, he was forced to stop working. That stillness was more frightening than the pain itself. He later admitted that he struggled emotionally during those early months, questioning who he would be if he could no longer bake. The thought followed him daily, quietly eroding the confidence that had carried him through decades of pressure. The long road back and the life he could have lost. Recovery did not bring clarity or relief to Buddy Valastro. It brought uncertainty. Doctors could not promise how much strength would return or whether his hand would ever perform the precise movements his work demanded. Physical therapy became his new routine, replacing ovens and cake orders with resistance bands, grip tools, and slow, painful exercises. Simple actions, holding a spoon, opening a bottle, lifting a light object, required focus and patience he had never needed before. Emotionally, this period was one of the darkest of his life. Buddy later admitted that the fear was not just about pain or disability, it was about identity. Baking was not a career he chose as an adult, it was the role he stepped into as a teenager to save his family. Without it, he did not know who he would be. The silence of recovery forced him to sit with questions he had avoided for decades. What happens when the thing that defines you is taken away? His family carried him through that uncertainty. His wife, Lisa, took full control of business operations, managing staff, schedules, and decisions, while shielding Buddy from pressure he could no longer handle. Their children became part of the recovery process, encouraging him during therapy sessions and helping him practice grip strength at home. For the first time, Buddy was not the one holding everything together. He had to accept help, something he had never been comfortable doing. Progress came slowly. By the following year, he had regained a significant portion of movement, but control remained limited. Still, Buddy returned to work before he was fully healed, filming competitive baking shows and stepping back into professional kitchens with modified techniques. He adapted rather than waited for perfection. He learned how to delegate tasks that once came naturally, how to pace himself, and how to accept physical limits without seeing them as failure. By late in his recovery, Buddy estimated he had regained nearly full strength in his hand, though fine motor control remained inconsistent. The return was not triumphant or dramatic. It was cautious, earned through repetition and restraint. What changed most was his perspective. The accident stripped away the illusion that hard work alone could protect him from loss. It forced him to confront how close he had come to losing not just a career, but the life he built around it. The man he is now, and the legacy he's protecting. When Buddy Valastro returned fully to work, it became clear that something fundamental had changed. He was no longer trying to prove how much he could carry on his own. The accident had shown him how fragile that approach was. For decades, Buddy had been the center of Carlo's bakery, the decision-maker, the problem-solver, the face of every success and every crisis. Now he understood that the future could not rest on a single pair of hands, especially hands that had nearly been taken from him. This shift became visible when he launched Cake Dynasty on A&E. Unlike Cake Boss, the show was not built around spectacle or impossible deadlines. It focused on transition. Viewers saw Buddy step back and allow his children to take real responsibility inside the business. Mistakes were no longer edited out or quickly resolved by him stepping in. They were allowed to happen. Decisions were debated. Pressure was shared. Buddy positioned himself as a mentor rather than the hero of every moment, guiding standards instead of enforcing them through sheer force of will. At the same time, the business itself evolved. After years of aggressive expansion, Carlo's Bakery reduced its physical footprint. Several locations closed, not as a sign of failure, but as a strategic correction after the strain of the pandemic and changing consumer habits. The brand leaned more heavily into nationwide shipping, online orders, and cake vending machines placed in high-traffic locations. Buddy focused on sustainability rather than scale, choosing consistency over rapid growth. It was a quieter approach, but a healthier one. Personally, his priorities narrowed. Time with his wife Lisa and their children became non-negotiable. The chaos that once defined his schedule was replaced with structure and limits. His hand never fully returned to the way it once was, and some tasks still required patience and adaptation. But Buddy accepted that reality. He no longer measured success by how much pain he could endure or how many hours he could work without stopping. So when you look at Buddy Valastro today, do you see a comeback or a man who finally learned when to stop carrying everything alone? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it.